All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on episode 94 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. We have our full panel with us. I've got Ben Toth from Page Hungary, Ian Cummer from Moscow, Carlo Parcelli from DC. I'm Billy Bob on the West Coast. We've got our special guest this morning is Imanoil Theordorescu. I think I might have butchered that a little bit. He is from Romania, but he is currently living in Toronto, Canada. He is a professor of mathematics, and we definitely want to get into this topic that I titled our program "The Weaponization of Ignorance," and we want to talk about the abysmal state of education in the West, and also in Europe. But you know, I think to present this topic, I just want to kind of give the context. The context, and the context that I always like to go to is the context of class struggle and the idea that under capitalism, where the means of production are privately owned, you have a division among society between the interests of the ownership class and the interests of the working class. So these two classes struggle to control the political system and the government. And one of the weapons that the ownership class has at their disposal to maintain political control is definitely the weaponization of ignorance and the dumbing down of the masses and keeping them uninformed and disenfranchised from the political system. And so this, to me, is the only logical and rational way to approach the topic of ignorance, and it kind of explains the dismal state of affairs of the Western education system. I think it's by design, and it's not through it's not an accident, right? It's not an accident. There's not a will to create an informed, intelligent citizenry that understands what's going on. That's not in the interest of the ownership class. But so there's a couple ways in which they maintain this ignorance that I've listed up and we can talk about, but I definitely don't want to monopolize. And I'm wondering if, as I'm talking, anybody has some thoughts that they would like to interject, or I can keep talking.
Keeping talking is fine. But I wish I knew the topic was beforehand, because I could have at least talked to my parents on this, because they're from higher and lower education spheres, and they complain about what's been going on for the last 20, 30 years within Hungary, the post-Soviet sphere, which was a really good. And I think Imanoil has some thoughts on this too, so I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah,
from me.
Go, if you're able, Imanoil, that would be great.
Well, I can try. I stopped speaking in front of an audience in 2021 in March, when they fired me. So you can look that up online, what that was about. I don't know. It's probably, I'm afraid, maybe the age. I hear, if it's not your first language, you kind of lose it later. So whatever happens is not going very well lately. So I'm not sure how well I'll be doing today. In any case, let me say that, I hope I won't be completely disappointing today. I normally, like most people, I like to listen to what they say. For example, Mr. Toth, if I say his name correctly, I don't know how that H is supposed to be pronounced or not, or whatever the accent of his name. But in any case, so when I graduated from university in '88, my first 2 years till 1990 was in a city, Oradea, which I think is called Vorodi in Hungarian, which is about 12 kilometers away from the border. And I had Hungarian students in class together with Romanian students. One of them was really a very good student, was cheerfully trying to tell me that he would teach me Hungarian if I wanted to, and he really wanted me to. So actually, it's a big difference. I don't know if he realized it, but in the end, 1989, 1990 came, and then I went back to Bucharest. And I was in the engineering school for 5 years there before crossing the Atlantic to go to school in the US, in Kansas to be precise. Now, one thing I would say is that, it's not an imputation to anybody here or even outside, because there are very many things to talk about and very important. But one thing I don't hear is nothing about this Eastern Europe. What was it like before? We really don't know. From the point of view of my country, all the neighbors around are Slavic, and that means we're lucky if we understand 3 or 4 words based on the linguistic influence. And if we add the Hungarian, which is related to Finnish in Europe, and we don't understand the word, I don't know how hard Romanian is for them, but apparently they do well with foreign languages anyway. So the thing is, back then, before 1988, we sometimes watched TV around. We watched the World Championships because they stopped broadcasting that, I think, in 82 or so. And, we did not really understand the thing. We just watched the images. So therefore, we had basically no idea what was going on, except in Bucharest, for example, we could see that on the Bulgarian TV. It was a lot of food. And we were very short in food in those years, because starting in 78 or so, Ceausescu started paying an accelerated pace all these credits he had made with the World Bank or the IMF. I don't know exact details. It's already reported by the right-wingers after 1989. The thing is that for about 11 years, we paid $21 billion back for some loans that totaled reportedly 11 billion. And they were reported as paid in March 1989. But after that, the situation didn't get better with food and heating and other things, maybe because they are now raising currency to, replenish the treasury. We were never explained what was going on there. But it was very, very tough years. And I don't want to tell you, I have no intention of comparing with life of people in places like, North Korea, Iran, Cuba, whatever. No, it wasn't. I can't imagine, even without knowing their details. It wasn't as bad, but it was bad. It was really tough. Not having the heat, not having, baby milk for certain people in certain situations. It wasn't in my family, but there were really, really bad conditions. On top of that, I don't think the leadership was very skilled. As I tell you, I don't know in how many socialist countries, the leaders did something like ours did. For example, so Ceausescu, quite well known back then for being unorthodox. We can say now, it looks like the torch has passed to Hungary these days. They are the unorthodox ones today. Okay, well, the wheel of life is turning. But the point is, this guy was originally a peasant, apparently smart, but not very educated. Never mind that. But his wife, reportedly about the same education level, like 4th grade, 8th grade, somewhere in that range. Now, she gradually became at some point world-renowned scientist in chemistry. Now, whoever was writing, scientific works on her behalf is not really clear. We can only hear today about that from right-wingers. But the thing is, when she spoke occasionally, she didn't seem very educated. In particular, she did not pronounce very well pedagogy. I think she was pronouncing like in the, interbellic period with a German influence, where the D was pronounced a T in pedagogy. Anyway, the thing is, they did this horrendous thing, and they were the butt jokes of everybody. I mean, she is a scientist, and to this day, that's what hung to her name, the scientist. Reportedly, she was referring to carbon dioxide as kodoi, which is a bad name for tail in Romanian. Okay, like an exaggerated bad name for tail. Anyway, so we have no idea if in other socialist countries the level of derision was at the same, low levels as in Romania or not. My overall point is like this. Why do I insist on education? So I should actually stop with whatever you call this, anecdotic details, and go straight to the point to the best I can. Why am I making this point? Your host here called me passionate. Well, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. Oh, Mr. Parcelli, in a way you might be my favorite because you're Italian, I understand, at least by name or some recent ancestry or something like that. In my case, I'm half a quarter Italian because my grandmother's father was Italian, came to the Danube River city I was born in, the ninth in the country. It's called Brăila, by the way, but it's not well known outside the country. So the point is like this. It is personal injury. It is personal injury to struggle with students who basically know nothing. What happened to our profession? Absolutely destroyed. Absolutely destroyed. Now, what is the main point, though? In my opinion, limited experience as I might have, and I do have limited experience with real world, the population cannot defend itself, politically speaking. In other words, not being schooled, they are essentially unable to talk back to authorities. When the authorities tell them this or that, however outrageous that might be in various ways, the population cannot laugh back at them and tell them back, you're crooks or you're lying. They can't. I personally regard as an exaggeration, a huge exaggeration. A lot of people on the left criticizing the situation, they refer to all this as manipulation, as propaganda, and I strongly disagree. I asked them directly, why are you not, fooled by propaganda? Well, because I think you're better educated or something. Because in my opinion, humble or not so humble, if somebody is educated, then you cannot really fool them with propaganda, or hardly at best can fool them. Sometimes, some of them with propaganda. So what happens really, propaganda, whatever it is that it is successful in the first place because people are very, very poorly educated. Okay? And then they cannot defend themselves. They cannot, argue about socialism. They have no idea about scientific, knowledge to argue. It's not just the theory of socialism. My point is, if school actually seriously prepare people in exact sciences, whatever they may be, math, physics, chemistry, biology, and many others are not really, well versed enough because I'm not really interested, they would be very hard to fool with simple, cheap arguments. In Romania, for example, if you're curious, do you know how they evoke, that socialist period? They evoke it by those last 10, 12 years, when it was huge scarcity of all sorts of resources because we were furiously paying back the loans because apparently the interest rates had been raised near the around the late 70s, beginning of the 80s. Well, what would the population today know about all that? Basically nothing. And when our school level went down at catastrophic levels, you can imagine how they can actually argue today. I don't know if you know, but in the old times, they were saying about us that the fierce Communist Party had 4.3 million members out of, 22 back at the time. Well, guess what? That Communist Party was banned right away in December 1989. Do you know for what? For all those 10 years of scarcity. They never said what they were trying to do there, trying to pay the loans at an accelerated pace, or why they were trying to do that. No mention of that. It was simply those were terrible years. That is socialism. That's it. Okay? I can tell you the following. In 1948, when the communists started the reform of the education system, the population was largely illiterate. I only learned around a few months ago in a broadcast somebody was claiming, right-wingers, that the illiteracy level was at 78% in those times, in 48. My own grandmother, the half Italian, okay, who had gone to some Catholic school from around age 12 or whatever to age 17 when she was pulled out and married at age 18, she was asked by communist authorities, I mean, they came on the streets, and she was asked to teach some neighbors around, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 families, to teach them around, to teach them to read, write, and basic arithmetic, addition, subtraction, multiplication, stuff like that, division, You can imagine the disaster. My grandmother was completely apolitical, if you can believe, that kind of Catholic with a, pure heart. Okay, so she was not bothered that all those were the communists or whatever. She was just proud that she was trusted with that kind of thing to do with a few families. You need to understand, my home city was the 9th in the country, a little over 200,000 people, which is now small in Romania. The biggest Bucharest was over 1 million, yes, and later over 2 million, but all the other ones barely went to 300,000 to 500,000, and my city with a little over 200,000 was the 9th in the country by population, and we were living on a very poor street, like 10-15 minutes walk away from the city center, so not really far away on the outskirts, in some poor place in the outskirts. It was close to the city. It must have been a disaster. And I remember growing up in the 70s, and my city still looked poor to me, but I won't get into that. So my point is like this. And today the education system went back to horrendous level. The population will not be able to defend the idea of socialism, to ask for socialism. I was telling your host yesterday, because we had a meeting to decide, do you think I'm interesting enough for either your panel or your viewership for all I have to say? So let me say this. In 1959, Romania, who had a very good school system inspired from the French at the end of 19th century, beginning of 20th century, in 1959, they started the IMO. You can look that up. Who was doing the best in the IMO in those years? Not exactly us. It was our neighbors. Just ask Mr. Toth. They were doing fantastically well in those times, in the first few meetings. And then it expanded to what it is today. Virtually all the countries participate. I don't know if Romania asked for permission, consulted the Russians, the Soviet Union, whatever. I have no idea, but I know they did that. Maybe they were looking for a sport where they can beat the West. I have no idea. But in Romania, it was national sport. The things have degenerated to a bad level today. I hear some rumors from some people in the system that there is a quiet resistance, in the sense that some teachers, we call them professors, it's the French language. You can see it used here in Quebec. They actually do more than was required by whatever means, but that is quietly. I don't know if that really has much efficiency. We still certain thin segments of the population interested in competitions and so on, and is heavily derided and fought against by the right. This is the situation now. So where am I going with this? I think I already made the main point. The population in Romania is completely oblivious, basically, now to what went before. These supposed teachers that resist, they're actually on their way out. In 89, I was just starting my profession. Now I'm 5 years away from retirement. Pretty soon, even grandparents, the grandparent generation now, pretty soon grandparents themselves will not remember what serious school looks like. They won't remember. There will be no witnesses left. Maybe some books nobody looks at. Okay, so let me try to wind this down a bit and maybe leave it to other people. But I will try to outline a certain path that I may get on a little bit today when I get my turn again to say something. I would like to, I prepared a bunch of videos to show you that the situation is international. I don't know if I be able today to share the screen just a little bit. I'm not going to show much of any of the videos, just how they start. You may get the idea of what's inside by just watching 5 seconds or 10 seconds of that video. So is that okay?
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. You can hit the present button and we can put it on screen.
Yeah, I can try. So right now, I will start with this article. Mr. Toth, one of your, is not correctly said, compatriots, you will be what? Anyway, Hungarian ethnics from Romania. Okay, where is I have a bit of problem. Let's see, where's the button for is present? Okay, I don't.
Yep, the middle one.
Present share screen. I guess I'm trying to share the screen. And I'm trying to share the screen, 2 monitors. Yes, I'm using 2 monitors. Okay, I'm trying. So I'm selecting the window now, see if I'm capable. Yeah, here it is. So do you see this article? You can see his Hungarian, Imanoil Theordorescu or something like that.
Yep.
And he says, I was a professor for a semester and that was enough. And he's talking about university level. So he's a linguist. He is married to a lady who was an Italian professor at the time in university. And at some point, she was supposed to teach a Latin course. And his wife was not really specializing in Latin, but she's an Italian professor. And therefore, he takes over as a linguist. He was better qualified. And here's the article that summarizes his experience. I was a professor for a semester, and I had enough of it. Okay? So he starts here by saying he hesitated for a long time until he decided to write his text, and probably he would have never done it if he had not gone through a starting experience. And then he starts talking about a long list of scary things that you would not believe could happen in a university today in Romania, or maybe in other places too, because I don't really know the whole thing. Here's the point. We had in university and elsewhere mostly right-winger professors before 1989. They were really the better professors as far as I can tell. No offense. I was a left-winger, but I wasn't talking much about it. Our best professors were right-wingers. Those people would have died if we had been this kind of stupid and weak, in their classes. They were already very unhappy when they caught us being less prepared for their classes for whatever reason. For example, we could have had in university, we could have had a professor that was a bit weaker or a bit, lazy or whatever. And then in the next course, we would pay by being not so prepared, like differential equations, And then the complex analysis part was a bit weak, and then we paid. And that guy, who was most likely a right-winger, never tried, to help us catch up. He would just be upset, sometimes cut the class in half, and move on the next encounter with other things. So sometimes that was the scary experience. They were horrified when we were not properly prepared. Well, if they had lived to see this disaster, I don't know what they would have said. Okay.
Yeah,
so
that's
wait a second now. So this was the article. I'll try to provide the links later. Then
all right.
The next point is, I guess, do you see that I changed the tab?
Yeah, let me add it.
So this is a historian who got his PhD in history at Ohio University. Okay, his name is Mircea Platon, as I can see, that Greek name. And he wrote a book during the COVID times about the deschooling of Romania. Do you see here, deschooling of Romania, step by step? This was an expression that our German president, Mr. Klaus Johannes, used in his, when he campaigned for becoming a president, that step by step he will improve Romania because he was a German and he was serious, and Romanians kind of agree with that. You should see one important thing he says there is the following, that Romania has signed in the documents when getting the loans from the IMF and from the World Bank, but I'm not talking about the loans before 89, about the loans after that. I told you earlier we paid 21 billions reportedly for a loan of 11. Today, the debt of Romania is something like way over 100 billion, more like 150 to 200 billion. Nobody talks, about how it's going to be paid or what the point is about having that debt when they would acknowledge that that's never been paid. But to tell you the exact most important thing in all this 52-minute interview, or 53, is that he says that Romania in the agreements for getting these loans looks like they signed that they will restructure, including their education, which means there's no hope for them to reverse that because they actually signed papers that they would do that. Okay, so that was the one thing. Here, if I show you this guy who is
You can turn on the volume by.
Oh,
if you turn it up, we can hear it. But you can just tell us about it too.
I can tell you briefly. My intention was to provide these links for this episode, and people can see it later. But of course, I'm trying to briefly show what this is about. So what is here? You saw that screenshot in the beginning. That is an American Iranian telling people that he moved to the U.S. when he was, I think, 8th grade or 7th grade or something like that, and he was tested and ranked as 12th grade, but he doesn't say it the proper way. He does not say that that 12th grade students in the U.S. were equivalent to 7th or 8th graders in Iran. He says it the other way, that he, as a 7th or 8th grader, he was ranked as 12th grader in the U.S. And of course, in my opinion, that's saying it backwards. Okay, the correct way to say is that the 12th grader in the U.S. is a 7th or 8th grader in Iran, which is probably the right thing. Okay, the next one. The next one here, is one of the many French who are absolutely, terrified with the state of their education. This is just one of them, and they seem to be very competent high school professors, typically in literature. And they talk about students not being able to even speak properly, never mind knowing much about literature at all. Now, here is another guy with an Italian last name, Jean-Paul Brighelli, who talks. He has many videos on YouTube. Here is the one called, Black Blackboard, Black Picture, on the sinking of school, sur l'effondrement de l'école. But he has many. He has one called The Factory of Imbeciles. He has very many videos. Now, here is one that,
okay.
Let me say this one really burst out from the very few seconds. This guy is a German scientist, is a physicist, and for some reason he decides to make this episode about education that is absolutely incredible. So tell me, please, where is the button I need to try to use to turn up the volume?
Right here. Well, shoot, you can't see where I'm putting. So we're the little play, and then the fast forward, and then right next to that is a volume button. If you hit play on it.
If you hit play and we can't hear it, then it might have been an earlier setting.
On my computer, I can try to turn it up to 100%. Okay.
It might work.
And here is already 100%, as you can see.
Yeah, if you hit play and we still can't hear it, then it might have been while you were sharing. You have to click also share audio. But let's see. Hit play. Hit play.
That's why.
Yeah, if you can hear that, because we can't.
Yeah, tell me please, where is that button again?
It was in the sharing, so we can. If you stop sharing, I can remove your sharing. If you'd like to stop sharing and present again, then there's a little toggle at the bottom when you share the screen saying also share audio.
Yeah, please interrupt because I'm not sure I'm going to get to do this fast enough.
Well, I mean, I think
I need to tell you then what this guy says. This guy is a scientist, is a physicist, and he mostly complains for 10 minutes about students in university not being able to do percentages. You know, not being able to do percentages, if you can believe it. This is a scientist, is an astrophysicist, and is talking about students not being able to do percentages in university at the time. And this is another German lady who was a scientist and turned into teaching, and you can see there some comments. The students are saying, yes, but she is friendly and she knows her stuff. And you can understand from there that the point is that not most teachers know what they're talking about, even in the view of the students. On the other hand, if you hear the comment from the grown-ups in this video, do you know what they impute to her? Well, but she is not well versed in pedagogy. And this is the big way they cheat in all this discussion and quarrel. They insist fraudulently on ways to teach. They always insist on, but they don't know how to teach it. And what they hide, what they obscure, is that the academic content, that the scientific content of the classes has gone down to incredibly low levels. And this is not good for that working class of the many. They will not be able to defend their point of view, their status. They will not be able to do it. I found from Italians this video. This is not an academic. This is kind of an amateur. This is kind of a low-level entrepreneur. But if you see how he starts, just see it.
You're no longer sharing to us.
Oh, yeah. So
okay. That's the Italian. He's saying falliti. That means, falliment. That means, what is that? Bankruptcy, bankrupt people. Okay, that's what he's talking about. What is he talking after that? That people come out of school with all sorts of degrees in all sorts of, social sciences, and they don't produce a thing. All they do is, cheap social talk. Not just social talk, cheap social talk. They produce nothing. They learn nothing. So I am sure that if I were better versed in foreign languages, I would be able to find many, many more examples. I am convinced that this is throughout democracy. The last example I show you here, I'll show you just the screenshot. It's a whole hour. Do you know who this lady is? This lady is an expert in education. It's one of these people who defend the current system in education. She keeps bragging for an hour that students deserve a better schooling, but she's not talking about the academic content. It's all talking about ways to teach properly. Ways to teach properly. What to teach properly? Nothing.
Okay.
So
I mean,
sure
they're very
find a lot more.
legitimate, point of view. And when I initially contextualized, this discussion within class struggle, I think this is a very legitimate and important and necessary aspect of the class struggle that needs to be addressed. And it's tough because, like you're saying, even when, the communists were in power, they weren't able to do enough on the education front to allow, the people to not be, many of them overcome by, Western culture. So they weren't educated.
Please let me say this. I am
aware. You've said a lot, Imanoil. You've said quite a bit, and I know there's other people that want to talk.
I am aware of this weakness. I'm not trying to hide it. We had 45 years of building that society and having good school for the most part, and it kind of went away in smoke. And I have no good explanation how that happened, except the better educated people have left the country. It was during the Syrian war that they were pointing out that according to the CIA, Romania was number 2 in the world for emigration by percentage of population, and we had no war on our territory. Number 2 after Syria. So apparently, the better educated people, whether they were left or right wingers, they left.
Yeah.
And
we've definitely discussed that on this program in the past. You know, we talk about the brain drain, and we talk about how the United States, does a good job of impoverishing other countries, and then all the affluent people, the people that have means, the educated people, they leave their countries and they come here, and that benefits the United States, and it also is detrimental to those countries that they leave from. But again, I see all this within the context of class struggle, and the question is, what can we do about it? And what are the implications of what you're pointing out? Because everybody agrees you're pointing out legitimate issues. But the question is, what do these issues mean, and how can we overcome them? So, Carlo?
Could you invite more people who could address this problem, and possibly international people? Everybody speaks English. So why not have some guests from non-English speaking countries to see what the situation is over there?
Well,
I'm pretty sure it's exactly as you described. But Carlo,
here there's no clearer example of class struggle being involved in this than the Vietnam War. After the Vietnam War, education in this country took a nosedive. People like me, who never intended to go to university, ended up in university so I wouldn't be drafted. Now, I had my own problems with that. But after that, and my wife will attest to this, she's older than one of her younger brothers. And when she went to the same high school, it was very educational. In fact, it was utterly open to all kinds of thought. It was enlightened. By the time her brother got there, 10 years later, it was fraught with drugs. The education was dirt poor, and that was because people became afraid. The elite became afraid, as Billy Bob would attest to, because people were becoming educated during the Vietnam War. They were beginning to think for themselves. You had the Gulf of Tonkin, you had Dien Bien Phu, you had the Tet Offensive, and it was all impacting on them. And so a lot of people like me who would have never gone to university ended up in university, and we broadened our horizons. The other thing I want to add, though, and this is a little contradistinct, as Noam Chomsky points out, that the people who are the worst offenders, who are the most right-wing, who are, in a sense, the most people in the know, who feign a kind of ignorance to foster their inhumanity, are the elites. I'll give you one anecdote. I have a friend of mine who was in a tenure track position at Yale in the classics.
Elites of the academia, yeah.
And he left. He gave up the tenure track position because the rest of the department, he was a political leftist, and he and I did research together for the Texas Observer and other newspapers like that. And he left because they were so far right and out of touch with what was really taking place in American political life and its foreign policy, that he couldn't stand being there. And Chomsky makes that point, that class is also that it's purposely subversive and oppressive, and even that, and they're very educated at the same time. I'm in Washington D.C., and there are hundreds of people, thousands of people like that, functionaries. One of the cliches is, if you're going to go to use the rare bookseller. If you want to go to a good book sale, with a lot of history, a lot of intellectual material. You don't go to Maryland, where I live. You don't even go to D.C. You go to Northern Virginia, where all the fascists live, because they read those books and they educate themselves to be able to keep people down. And they dominate the ideological atmosphere of that material. And so those are a couple of points I wanted to throw in. Also,
thank you, Carlo.
my
Go ahead.
family is from Body, so we're on the Adriatic. Good to know you.
My grandmother's family was for Udine, the other end.
Ah, yeah. Okay.
So I wanted to go ahead, Ian. Sorry.
I was going to say, I mean, every industrialized country to some extent still follows the Prussian model of education system. You know, that was the first time in world history when, you know, mass education was available and was considered important. Because, you know, before that, it was just like 5%, 10% of the population was literate. So, but still based, but the problem is for a lot of these countries, except certain communist countries, you know, the model is never updated. It was, you know, give people the education they need to be useful in the workplace. You know, they know how to string a sentence together. They know the ABC, they know the alphabet. What people unfortunately don't need to learn is critical thinking. And actually, there was a comment here earlier. And we've mentioned that on this show before, that even our elites, you know, even these guys, these Elon Musks in Silicon Valley don't know critical thinking. They got some STEM degree. They're very good at math or computer science or whatever they went to college for. But they don't know, they're not any better at critical thinking than the rest of us. So it's not a class. So, you know, we adopted the Prussian education system. But what we didn't adopt for mass education was a classical education where you know, because people, you know, those elites in, you know, past centuries who got a classical education is a very small percentage of the population. But people who did get an education got a classical one. They knew they had at least surface level knowledge of the arts, of literature, of everything you need to be a well-rounded, educated person. And now we don't. Most people don't. Even in the upper income brackets, they still don't.
At the beginning of the episode, I was talking about how the ruling class of the ownership class that's it's also the ruling class is interested in perpetuating ignorance, and they're not interested in, you know, a solid education system that allows people to develop these critical thinking skills. But there's one other aspect to the education system under capitalism, right? And it's the commodification of everything. And what we see in capitalism is how things become commodified and then they start to deteriorate in worth. So that's no different in education. So they maximize the extraction of people's, you know, of money from the bottom, from the masses that have to get an education, and all that money goes up to the bank. So we're talking about student loans and the exorbitant increase in education fees at the university level, and of course private schooling. And then there's the charter school system, and that's just a way to get money into the hands of private owners. This necessity of education is being exploited by the capitalists to enrich themselves at the expense of the masses. And this is just how capitalism works. So not only are they ideologically interested in keeping us stupid and uninformed, but they're also interested in exploiting us and extracting, you know, money from us and to put into their private hands. So these are the two things that have resulted in the status quo of education as it is.
Can I add to that? But a bit of Eastern European color, because from Carlo we heard the Western story, which is the 60s basically. The people, I mean, it was a crisis. People coming back in body bags. People started to question the narrative, and academia was a fertile ground for some radicals, including Chomsky and his ilk. Before that all got pretty much, you know, co-opted and died out. Now the academics are the nest of reaction in the West. Now, with the East is different, because in the 1930s also, just like Mr. Theordorescu, I hope I pronounced that correctly,
Imanoil
said.
is okay, please.
Emmanuel, I'm sorry. Yeah, the education was 5 years of papal, as in Catholic education, and off you go to the field. You live in mud huts. That's 80% of the population, completely illiterate. There was some, you know, within the cities, some artisanal work and their little, what's an inosh? Their apprentices who learned the basics, but nothing. As the 1948, the revolution, mass schooling, and not the Prussian model that Ian, but it was a method of fighting back, not just to create the industrial base for the new country to build everything, but also an ideological study. And what the main difference that I think Billy Bob touched on, commodification, was the consumption was social. It really wasn't individual. That's the main difference. When I was a kid, on, you know, walking around in the neck of my dad, you know, taken around, people got Pravda from the East and Financial Times from London, right? And they went to, you know, the garages, had a few beers with the lads, or just the chess around the tables. There was these social groupings where they digested it all. And I swear there were welders and bricklayers, like with proper critical thinking skills. So that's another thing I'd add. I don't think it's something that's, a very nice individual skill, you know, that you create by, you know, learning the multiplication tables or learning classical logic. It comes from this social existence of questioning, which was very, very strong, and it's completely gone. That's what's gone in the way of complete individual conformity. We have a very highly skilled, I mean, still somewhat, some world famous names in there, Magyar Tudományos Akadémia, the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. When it came to some big questions in the world, which includes Ukraine, it includes COVID, we don't need to go into detail, they were lockstep exactly the same as the West. Zero critical skills were exhibited in the highest trained Hungarians. So I would kind of divorce this sort of formal training to a well-rounded, you know, cultured individual, as Andrei Martyanov likes to say, because Russia famously divorced the Bologna method, this sort of Western PhD, MD, all that shit, and going back to the classic Soviet system of specialists, where you get an all-rounded education from top to bottom, which includes the humanities, the hard sciences, and everything. So a bunch of points. I hope I kind of, I did an okay job of.
No, I appreciate that. I have some bullet points I'd like to list and talk about one specific one. But before I do that, does Ian you have some thoughts?
Well, I have a question for everybody, but maybe do the bullet points first, because I do have a question.
So these were just specific ways I was brainstorming about how they, you know, how they manipulate and control the education system, and essentially it's how they keep people uninformed and disenfranchised. It's through obviously controlling the curriculums in the institutions, and through the donor class, and through the promoting of people who have the correct ideology. You know, they become the deans, they determine the curriculum, and they're all dependent on the private donorship class, who of course are all, you know, of the same ideology. But let's see. So in the media also, they promote experts, right? So they talk about an expert. So they'll bring on an expert, but they pick and choose their experts. And so the expert that gets presented before everyone obviously is vetted and is saying the right thing. And there's going to be experts in that same field that have totally oppositional opinions and maybe the correct opinions, but they get to pick and choose the expert that they present. And then they control the topics of discussion. So the media really helps to control the topics of discussion. But as we've seen from our friend Gabriel Rockhill, they also, you know, control the topics of discussion through, you know, like we see at the Frankfurt School and the French School of Critical Theory. You know, they kind of determine what kinds of ideas get discussed. And so if you want to advance in university, you know, in the most prestigious places, you have to study and immerse yourselves in the thought of certain people who, again, might not have a lot of relevance to actually informing yourself in a real geopolitical way. And the last thing is the siloing of individual disciplines. So, you know, everyone that has a brain understands that you can't just make politics distinct from economics. But that's exactly what liberalism does. You get, political, political science, and then you have economics, and they're siloed. They're completely distinct from. It's ridiculous. There's political economy, and unless you understand that the two things are, integrally linked, you're not ever going to be able to deal with reality in an appropriate way. So the siloing of distinct fields and pretending that this is unrelated to this, because we know as Marxists that there is an interrelatedness of everything. You can't understand anything unless you understand how it relates to everything else. So that's just basic. Anyway, so I don't know if you guys want to talk about any of those things or if we want to move to something else.
I just want to say, we disagree on Rockhill.
Right, we do.
And he's absolutely wrong.
Okay.
I mean, that's not the way. The CIA did not use the Frankfurt School. They did not infiltrate our universities with the Frankfurt School. The Frankfurt School infiltrated because their ideas are interesting and thought-provoking. And that's all it comes down to. Nothing more than that. Rockhill's just...
Sure, but you should also read those ideas, what they oppose to, what they arose in opposition to, and you never get around to doing that.
A tiny fraction of what they're against. In fact, to the larger, 99% of it is humanitarian. It's a humanitarian impulses at the deepest level. Read Walter Benjamin. We can
move on, Carlo. We don't
need to be bogged down by this. But
you guys want to always move on, but you don't know what you're talking about.
That's fair.
When it comes to the Frankfurt School, you don't know. Rockhill is reverse engineering the whole thing for his reputation because he's made a stupid reputation on criticizing. Look, I got a call from a friend of mine. I hadn't talked to him in years. He's a rare map guy. And he brought it up out of the blue. He said, have you been listening to this guy, Rockhill? What a lying piece of shit. This guy has, and he has no content in his articles. He ranted for a half hour about how stupid the position was. He's thoroughly versed in the Frankfurt School. Believe me.
Yeah.
So he's invested. All right. I want to hear Ian's question.
I don't want to hear that anymore. Unless you know what you're talking about. Okay. Don't cite Rockhill because he doesn't know what he's just a gangster. He's trying to make a name for himself.
Question.
There's no have you read his articles? There's no context in his articles for what he's alleging. Nothing. Okay. It's all surface.
Ian, you had a question.
Christ.
Yes. So based on this 50-minute conversation between several people about education and what's effectively in much of the world a failure of mass education to teach critical thinking, to teach people to effectively be a good citizen. That raises me to ask, is even the concept of democratic, is a democracy even a sustainable or workable system of government? Because, when the first, those first classic city-states started, it was just the ownership class. It was literally just 300, 400 landowners debating what's the most pragmatic decision. If you're a landowner, let me just finish. So if you're a landowner, you have a pragmatic interest. If you vote to go to war and you lose the war, then your plantation gets burned down. So there's a practical reason for those people to think carefully before casting their votes. Now, I would say in the USA specifically, neither side says, well, we need to educate people so they make a good decision at the ballot box. No one says that. Neither side says that. What it is a head count. They go to each group of Americans to try to outnumber the other side.
Ian, why do you hate democracy?
I do hate democracy.
Why don't you move to Russia? If you don't like it here,
right?
Move to
Russia.
Go to Russia.
Go move to Russia, right? Because, it is a head. If you really think about it, and the United States is 51% women and 49% men. So if women all vote the same way, hypothetically, they would always win. one ethnic group's bigger than a different ethnic group. All it is a head count. You're just
I'm
getting
gonna get
these
my
blocks.
wife not to vote that way.
Yeah, exactly. You get these blocks of voters based on their literally their physical attributes. Say vote for our guy, vote red, vote blue. No one's voting for policy. It's been a very long time before anyone gave a crap about policy. So that's my question for everyone: is based on what we've talked about with education, is democracy even a workable system?
Well, I have thoughts, but I don't. Let's get Imanoil back in.
Yeah. I have another Eastern European perspective, but I want to hear Imanoil too.
Well, I'll be brief, of course. The short answer is,
of course.
You got to know me a little better today, okay? That's how I am. Okay, so as brief as I can. The short answer is I don't know. My point is as follows. If people want to be serious about democracy, I should hear them talk about schooling the population. You know, I do not imagine any democracy, any power of the people, in other words, without knowing what they're doing, and that requires schooling in all sorts of ways. I don't mean just, political, ideological. I mean in many ways schooling. That's the training of the thought. And if they don't give that, if they don't talk about giving that, I don't think they can be serious about any democracy. So that's all I need to say.
That was very short and pithy, Imanoil.
Okay.
Well, go ahead, Ben. You want to go?
Yeah, a second Eastern European perspective. I think, in America, I would be as bitter as you, saying it's utopian and maybe it never existed, maybe it never will. So to be completely correct with you on this, there is no society where everybody votes, shall we go to war? That's always done by military experts, by the executive power. So there's no such thing as direct democracy at that level. But in the socialist system, especially today in China, there's something called the full process democracy, where, millions of people elect someone above them to get millions more who get to a higher level to make substantive decisions on, resource allocations. People actually practice power. Like, what does my city need? Another fucking shopping mall or like a highway system? And people actually participate in that decision. In bourgeois elections, like what the United States is used to, you never, ever had that. I know the By the People, for the People foundational document says that, but you never did. All you got is the two crews led by originally big landlords, big capitalists, and they're the red team, the blue team, vote for me, I'm going to promise all this, and then you can keep shutting up for 4 years, 5 years, whatever the thing is. But here also, there isn't such a thing as the stupid utopian, Chomskyite anarcho-syndicalism where everybody gets to vote on when the lights come on in the evening, and how many calories will everybody? No. There are experts in the field of, engineering. There are experts in the field of mechanics and military and education. And there have always been these absolutely natural hierarchies within socialism. I'm not saying this is like, that sort of the philosopher's kingdom that Plato talked about, that ideal society that never happened, where people would, the most experts led the country, which would be a catastrophe. But there's multiple levels to it. It's never a complete direct democracy. Yeah. But what you have isn't that. What you have is a PR democracy, and it's pretty much falling apart in front of everybody's eyes right now, I think, especially in America. Yeah. But there is full process democracy where you actually do have a say whether you're a janitor or a professor of Latin. So let's not pretend that doesn't exist. Okay.
So, yes. I mean, that's an interesting point. I want to say that this idea that the West has and that the West inculcates and propagates and, propagandizes into everybody's minds about, we're a democracy and we're free and they're authoritarian and they're a dictatorship. That's just total nonsense, right? So it's nonsense from start to finish. But the idea of pure democracy is a bourgeois idealism. It has never existed. It can't exist, especially under capitalism, where society is divided on interests between the owners of industries and the workers. So there's going to be a class struggle, and then one of the two classes is going to control the government. And I mean, is the government going to act and operate on behalf of the masses, or is the government going to be a representative only of the wealthy elites, the ownership class? So those are really the choices. And I think one is far superior than the other. In the West, of course, we have a dictatorship of the ownership class. And, China's different. China has a government in power that's a dictatorship of the working class. And so they repress the ownership class. They do not let the ownership class call the shots. The Communist Party calls the shots based on the best interest of the working class. And so there's really no other option available, because if you pursue pure democracy and you say, hey, we're going to just let people vote, and then guess what? That empowers the wealthy elites to buy the propaganda apparatus to spam out their propaganda and to confuse people, divide people, and that's what we have in the West. And so I don't know.
Well, just to clarify, when I mentioned voting on policy, I didn't mean in case there's any confusion about what I meant. I didn't mean direct democracy. I meant it's been a very long time since anyone considered policy important when voting for a candidate or a party. It's always
it's antithetical to the U.S. system, isn't it?
Very tribal. Biden at one point literally said it. If you don't vote for me, you ain't black. And I think that's actually how it's considered. If you belong in a certain group, you're supposed to vote for that corresponding candidate. So it's just like at that point, it's not even a democracy. It's just a head count. Whichever group has a higher head count.
No, that's an accurate and great criticism of this so-called democracy. And I don't even call it democracy. I refer to that as a dictatorship of an oligarchy, a dictatorship of the wealthy elites. Carlo?
And, again, on an American-centric perspective on that, so the USA is a system of, that was the sales pitch for the USA. It's a system of checks and balances between sovereign states and an overarching federal government. And I'll just bring up abortion. I'm not arguing for or against abortion. I don't want to get dragged down that rabbit hole, but I'll bring it up as an example. After Roe versus Wade was struck down by the Supreme Court, I posted, they know that I agree with that decision. The reason why I agree with that decision is because we have sovereign states that did not change. States still have states' rights. Still, it's up to your state legislature to argue about what they think the law should be and make it for that state. And what was interesting about that is both sides were ripping my head off over it. You had the anti-abortion crowd saying, no, it needs to be banned everywhere. Then the pro-abortion were
when
saying,
the billionaires own the politicians, own both political parties, and own all the media platforms, how is anybody sovereign? So that's what I'm saying. It's to frame things like a constitutional way, in a legal way, in a sovereign way is not true, because it ignores the reality of oligarchy. And so I think I reject that framing, and I will always go back to the framing of we're in an oligarchy, we're in a dictatorship of the wealthy elites, because the Constitution is not anything but a piece of paper that nobody gives a fuck about. That's just the reality, Ian. So, you might care about it. Nobody cares what you care about. Scott Ritter might care about the Constitution. Nobody gives a fuck. The wealthy elites do what the fuck they want, and that's just it.
But there are.
Yeah, the point is good. You're supposed to kill each other over abortion, right?
Yes.
That's
yes.
No,
and so it is a polarizing issue that is never solved, because and it's very funny to see Biden or whoever is handling his Twitter tweeting, if you don't reelect me, Republicans will ban. Well, you're already freaking president.
That's a very important point too. It's not supposed to be solved. That's a very important point.
Carlo's been trying to get in.
Either way, go Carlo.
With abortion, Ian touches on an interesting point. There is the imperialist dimension. The U.S. is so obvious that people think it's the best because of the imperial largesse it gets from stealing from the rest of the world. But there's one thing that the elite knows that really speaks to the trope of freedom: sex. You have
that's a whole other can
of
worms.
You have free sex in this country, though in a certain sense, the sex in this country is among the most oppressive in the world. By its context, its nature, its pornography, the notion of pornography, and that sort of thing. But it does play to sexuality in all of its forms, from pornographic films, to
it
abortion,
pushes us down the road of degeneracy a little
to
bit.
feminism, just whatever. And the elite.
I mean, most of the entertainment industry is highly pornographized by now, really.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah, it's
I mean, advertising, just
sexuality.
basic advertising.
Yeah.
If you if you give people the impression that there's a freedom of sexuality in the U.S. Or a democracy, that goes, you're already 90% there, because sexuality is a lot more important than the notions of economics or politics. It's just at the root of everything. Just ask Lenny Bruce.
Also found in the hippie movement. That's where that comes from, the whole sexual liberation aspect of things.
Emmanuel, I do want to hear your opinions.
Me too.
You were way too brief the last time, and I feel guilty about reminding me.
No. I really intended to be brief at last intervention. Yes, okay.
Any thoughts on this? So, I mean, we're getting loud and spirited, and having a good discussion. Do you have any thoughts while you're listening to us?
I wish I could listen to you more. As I said earlier, maybe it's not bad if I repeat. I wish you could have some foreign guests. Yeah. I wish we heard more about what happened before 1989 in the socialist bloc, because we know very little about it. So let me repeat that. Normally, I'm not really connected to the world of politics. Normally, I just follow certain things, but not be able to comment more about it. The part I can really say something about it, you already heard it, and maybe you heard plenty of it for just 1 hour.
No, you're right about that, basically. If the grandfather generation in Hungary dies, it will be the same. Do you remember the painful stagnation of the 80s? That is all. Even though there's still remnants around us, and there's people who tear up, properly still tear up of how good life was.
Just a second. Not do you remember the painful times of the 80s? No, they will refer to the 80s and saying, do you remember the poverty in socialism? No, they will not make it specific. There was the 80s.
We had Gulyás communism in the 80s, so we were stagnating, but it wasn't nearly as bad as you guys. So, shortages and the IMF paying off. Obviously, privatization is the same thing that happened to you as happened to us in 1989. Huge swaths of industry just gone, sold off.
I imagine, but we don't know. The first prime minister we got in 1989 came out quickly and said that our whole industry was a scrap of metal. And it might have been in some ways true, because maybe they were neglecting about upgrading and stuff for 10 years of, forceful repayment of debts. But in any case, it was also an invite about, selling everything, destroying everything. They also kept telling us, that we missed the train of reforms, that Poland was way ahead, and we got a communist.
Oh, we got told that too.
Yeah, we got a communist, and therefore the communists remained in power. The second echelon theory, and they stayed in power, and they missed the train of reform, and they fell behind, and that was it. And just a second, I was trying to say one more thing about it.
Take your time.
Well, unfortunately,
missed the train of reform.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they kept blaming communism for this day, that we missed the train of reform, that Poland got ahead. And as I keep telling you, you just told us here about Hungary that, of course, but guess what? We don't know that, of course, the same happened with you, whatever, privatization and so on. Nobody told us anything. The languages around are not easy to understand for us. So please say more exactly what happened. Because for us, in the 1990s, they pounded us about, look at Poland, look at Hungary, look at the Czech Republic, look how well they're doing. And here they're communists. They took over and they slowed us down, and we lost the train of reform, and bye-bye, we'll be forever behind and so on. It's not that we believed it, but that's all we were told. So that's all we know. And, I may be exaggerating. People who actually got out of the country and traveled a bit around, maybe they understood a little bit better. But in my case, with a family being poor for a whole generation, all the Europe I saw was Vienna 3 days in 1992. The next time I went out, it was straight to the US going to school. I saw nothing in Europe, basically. We know nothing. I'm pretty sure that we were not being told much. And most people, whatever they know is personal experience, and I think it's limited. So it'd be very important if you could say more.
Jeffrey Sachs always claims that he was pushing the U.S. government to provide to Russia what they provided to Poland. And he was shocked and disgusted when the decision was not to provide Russia with the same kind of economic support that they gave to Poland. But definitely Poland was a beneficiary of Western largesse. And obviously that largesse was used, politically and propagandistically to convince, the rest of the Eastern Europe to, hey, see, it's oligarchy is better. You want oligarchy. So all the oligarchs and their apologists and their media outlets, definitely went to work on the minds of Eastern Europeans, convincing them that socialism is equal to poverty and misery and destitution, and capitalism equals, happiness, freedom, and prosperity. So, that's the lie, and that's the liberal apologia that they give, against socialism and against communism, but it's not real and it's not grounded in reality. And so we understand the context of the Soviet Union, right? So all of that country was destroyed. The United States accounted for half the global economy following World War II, and the Soviet Union and all of Eastern Europe was totally devastated, destroyed, and with very few, economic and financial resources. Plus, they were under an embargo by the wealthy West, and so they struggled. And there was incompetence and there was corruption, but there's also incompetence and corruption in the wealthy West that was the true beneficiary of the sacrifice of the Chinese communists and the Soviet communists. So if you understand the context, and who's our friend Ben that really does great, talks about the plastic bags, how they sold their soul for plastic bags.
Another guy who says, blue jeans and plastic bags.
Yeah.
Because that's how the revolution was sold.
He died in Turkey. He died in Turkey.
Oh, Andrei Blicek. Yes.
Andrei Blicek is a great, author, and he's written extensively about this paradigm, about how the Western culture was used to get people to oppose their own best interests, and how it, turned people's minds inside out and got them to worship these Western symbols of, plastic shopping bags instead of the great art they had and access to and things like that. But I'm ranting a little bit.
Oh, good.
It was a huge.
Go ahead.
I saw a great description in a post I was reading a while back. So when the Warsaw Pact dissolved and the Soviet Union dissolved, the big selling point to Eastern Europe was that, all these countries, Kazakhstan, Belarus, Ukraine, Czechia, all those countries can be like France. And it's just the Soviets, it's those bad Russians holding you back. Every one of those countries, Georgia can be the new France. It can develop and have the industry and the exports of France. But the problem with that promise, even before it even became a question of delivering that promise, is that there's already a France. There's already a Germany. They don't need, the European Union does not need two Frances. They don't need two Germanys. They don't need these countries becoming economic competition.
Of course not.
So what ended up happening instead is that their industry was dismantled, and they're just a source of cheap labor migrants. So it's almost a case of internal migration when you have one economic bloc. It's basically
resources get raped.
Yep. So it's just deindustrial. So those smaller countries end up. So basically, and actually, I had a discussion with this with an Italian friend recently, and the way she described. Whoops, I did not mean to do that. Italy is that place where you can get Russian wages and pay American prices. Somewhat literally true, because they have that. They're in the Eurozone, so they're paying the same prices as people in France, but with half the wages. It's one thing if you're in your own economic bloc, you can have your currency and your cost of living be basically whatever you want it to be, because it's a closed circuit. But when it's a shared economy with very rich countries, rich on paper countries, and very poor countries, they're just, so you have outward migrations. You see population of decline. Poland only had a little population decline, but the rest were much worse, 15-20% population decline from younger people leaving the country because there's just no jobs. They're import rather than export economies, so they're taking in these expensive imports from Western Europe and having to pay for them on local wages, which are terrible. And of course, there's other methods of exploitation too. When you get into child adoption, surrogacy, or the organ industry, it gets very bad the deeper
trafficking
you look into it. Yes.
Do you know what's eerie and scary about this? I found during the first year of the SMO, so 2022, I don't know where it is now, like this slideshow done by the EU of the promises made to when you join the EU, you will vacation on the Riviera. You will have the retirement home of a Spanish, nice Mediterranean home. It's the same thing that we were told in the 90s. We will have these beautiful competitive Euro salaries, and it will be the life of you can't even dream. And this whole PR, this whole thing fell apart. As you said, the population completely went to wash the dishes in the West. But even the propped up shit that was there to glean, to be beautiful and shiny, which is Germany, has now caught up to us in decay, in deindustrialization. It went the other way around. We said our roads are going to look like theirs. And, well, the other way around, but it turned out to be true. Yeah, our roads, US roads look as bad as our roads do today. So, yeah.
How far are the people of Western Europe going to allow themselves to be sacrificed? Are they going to allow themselves to be sacrificed to the extent the Ukrainians currently are?
This current leadership, I don't see any chance for it. We need actual sovereign leadership to actually say, hold on, you're not going to slaughter us. I don't know who's going to stand up for that other than Mr. Orban is trying to do, but I really don't, and Mr. Fito, but that's about it. Do you see anybody else?
I would say there's a big difference between active consent and passive consent. Being passive and allowing your country to be deindustrialized is one thing. It's fairly easy to do, and there's also that promise, at least for the middle class and upper middle class, that you can go to greener pastures, that you can get a green card and go to greener pastures when your economy is cannibalized. Of course, that doesn't really apply to Western countries who are supposedly already the greener pastures, but that said, if you're passive, I think is that, like that saying of boiling a frog. I think it's easy to get people to sit there and accept energy getting more expensive, food getting more expensive, and just collapsing the economy
slowly. Yeah.
But when you're talking about something active, active participation is, hey, do you want to be drafted to go fight Russians in Eastern Europe? I think that's I was surprised by how much Ukrainians participated in the war. I never would have imagined. I think everybody was, if you look at the attitudes of people on both sides of the aisle, up until the SMO actually started, the general consensus was, there's not going to be a war. And even if there was a war, it'd be a quick scuffle, basically. Maybe a few hundred casualties, and then they would kiss and make up, and that would be the end of it. And I don't think anyone expected 500,000 deaths in a multi-year war. But when it comes to Western Europe, I don't see those people jumping into lining up around the block to go fight. I don't.
In any country, whether it's relatively poor Eastern Europe or relatively rich Western Europe, you're talking about the immobile lower rungs of, not the cosmopolitan elite who are drafted in. And across the board, all the polls say no, fuck no. This is not something we're going to cross.
Poland is allegedly creating,
and even in Poland,
a battalion or regiment of volunteers, right? And this is what a
battalion of volunteers, or even a regiment of volunteers, is a drop in the bucket. Though you can find 5,000 volunteers in a big enough country. It's very easy to find 5,000 volunteers, but not 500,000. No.
Yeah, that's not the same as drafting the fighting age population, where even the polls say no, thank you.
It is an escalation, though. I mean, it's an escalation on the side of Poland. Oh, and also they're going to start knocking down the missiles, right?
Heading towards Poland, where nothing landed in Poland, but yes,
so there's some escalations going on, and we'll see. Like that was my question, really. Like, when does this escalation stop? Is it going to escalate all the way to where Western Europe's sacrificing? But I appreciate the answer, Ian. You don't think that's going to happen? I hope you're right. I hope the escalation doesn't even get that far. But yeah, if it does, I hope that's when the revolution comes and they start, disemboweling the oligarchs, because that's what needs to happen. God bless them.
I think if there was enthusiasm for this idea that maybe we could have a fast conventional conflict with Russia that's fast enough so they don't escalate to nukes, and we just get the upper hand in this region that we're fighting in, and then they decide not to just take the L and not escalate it. Any opportunity for that to even conceivably work was in March, April, not even April, like
the mother of all sanctions.
March, those first 2 months. And also we have to remember that where the Russian army is right now in eastern Ukraine, it's not easily accessible to NATO forces without a very large commitment. And there's nothing really close to those airfields in Poland. And if Poland starts shooting down projectiles from their territory, then Russia could shoot back at those launchers. And then that's just as good as, because if you're going to go in and actually directly attack Russia, you need to go all in and win quickly. So it's just doing a half-assed measure of shooting down a few $500 drones. You're going to get direct retaliation back. It's better to just go all in and hope you get the upper hand in that first exchange and it doesn't escalate to nukes. But I don't.
So, but I noticed
Jesus, I hope Donald Tusk doesn't think that.
10 U.S. military bases in Finland, or is it NATO military bases in Finland? And also the world's largest base is in Romania, right?
Being built, yes.
Yeah.
On the Black Sea coast.
So the West is definitely engaged in, these measures to continue and escalate and make sure that, they don't take the L anytime soon. But meanwhile, in Ukraine, the front is deteriorating rapidly for the Ukrainian side, for the NATO side. But at the same time, you see these developments in the rear taking place.
Do you know a fellow called Julian Röpke? He's a Bild reporter, right? One of those staunch Ukraine's going to win, Russia's running out of missiles. I just want to quickly share something that he posted, because when he comes around to this point, and obviously he's German, so you can see the machine translation of one of the videos of the Monday strike over Kiev, which we don't have to watch, but yeah, it got pounded. HIMARS, Patriots, everything's getting hunted. But he said the capital's air defense is at an end. Ukraine will have neither electricity nor heat next winter. I think those things matter a little bit more than a horrific terrorist attack on, beachgoers at Odessa. And this
I like
is
that.
where
Our government leaders have failed miserably. No, that's an important point.
Yeah, he means the German government, but obviously, Mr. Whoever's behind Biden is at the head of the whole project. Yeah, I just thought this was significant from a guy who was complete Ukraine champion.
Well, since we're so far away from the education aspect of the program, what do you guys think about the notion that the hospital that was bombed is a false flag? I mean, I'm hearing it from people like Larry
it was
Johnson.
An air defense missile. It seems like an accident that the Ukrainians did when they tried to shoot down a missile.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, 5 miles, like 3 kilometers away, was the Artyom, the rocket missile plant in Kiev. And a lot of the Verkhovna Rada, the parliamentary people are saying, shit, we need to move this out of the civilian areas like you should have done like 2 years ago. But yeah, it's conceivable because the air defense, the Patriot system, they just get porcupined around it in civilian areas. And every footage, the analysts who do this early say, yep, that's I think the one that's shot by the Norwegian NASAM system, like it's almost perfectly obvious that that's what happened. No tail. It wasn't like a shot or an impact of one of those big fab bombs. It's obviously a low impact air defense missile. So it was weird that Zelensky said, thank you for filming this, which I thought was illegal, like filming any impact in Ukraine. But he said that immediately.
Ben, did you have more clips to share? I know.
Well,
you
I
prepared.
wasn't really. This wasn't going to be a current events episode that much. I don't think. I mean, we got the
there
US.
was the Victor Orban interview.
Yeah, I mean, the guy, give him some credit. I don't know actually if I shared audio. The same thing that happened to Imanoil. So I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to make sure I tick it. So we can just do a quick. This was when he was going, I think, from Moscow to China, and Bild, the German outlet, bastard interviewed him. And this is what a short little thing about Russia.
May I say, it cannot be lost. It's
in his English.
You mean soldiers?
Yes, soldiers, equipment, technology, which used in a war. So to defeat Russia is an idea which in Russia is, it's even difficult to imagine. So it's the possibility that Russia will be beaten is totally out of any calculation.
It is totally out of any calculation, but a lot of the people in the West, I mean, what he said later was the casualties are going to get much worse in the coming months than they were, say, last year. And also that the US has a plan of war, China has a plan of peace, and the stupid EU just follows verbatim what the US does, and they should have a sovereign policy. That's pretty much his angle. It's a good one. I don't think he's going to achieve anything, but he can say later, I tried. That's just my short take.
Great analysis, Ben. I totally agree with that. I watched that entire interview almost, and it was a good interview. But yeah, you summarized his approach great, and I think you're right. I don't think he's going to get anywhere with it, but he will be able to tell people, hey, I did what I could, because he's the president of the EU now is.
Well, the rotating presidency, I think, of the EU Parliament is now with Hungary, so he can say he's the head of that. But immediately as he went to Moscow, all the Eurocrats, including Ursula, Michel, Borrell, all of the others said, "You do not represent us. You shouldn't appease the Putin." There was that chorus.
Didn't he also say that he's not going to tell us what it is, but his mission continues early next week? And maybe he was talking about.
I think he said that big things are coming. That he said that before he showed up in China. But right now he's, I think, already in Washington D.C. here, like from China.
So yeah, he's talking to the big players directly. So Ukraine, then Russia, then China, then the U.S., and then the EU, and yeah, he's going to do what he can, and which is probably nothing.
What used to be the mediation. I mean, the error of his ways, he got us into NATO. If you read that, he wrote an op-ed for Newsweek, right? Where NATO was supposed to be this alliance, a peaceful, defensive alliance, and that's what it should return to. I think he knows it was never that. I think he should be fully aware of that, or is it in delusion land? But I think that article is meant to present this, as a weapon, as in, hey, this is what you said it was. And it's pretty obvious you're being very offensive outside your own damn borders. So it's a very good, if you like, a literary weapon that he's using there.
He identifies himself as a bourgeois centrist, right?
I guess you would say that. He identifies himself as a Christian conservative.
Okay. In the interview, he was using some Marxist terminology, which I appreciated, and he was straight up, I'm a bourgeois centrist, I think is a direct quote. But, so he does, like he represents the nationalist interest of the oligarchs in his country who understand that, the overall global oligarchy class, the direction they're going isn't going to be good for his country, and so he doesn't want to sacrifice his country on the altar of the globalists.
Yeah, you can say that. The new word he's been using in his new EU group, like this conservative group, is sovereigntist, which kind of works, I think, for what he means. Yeah.
Imanoil, are you sure you wouldn't like to share some opinions further?
Yeah, as I said, I'm not really implicated into any sort of politics. It's my area of interest that, in my view, destroyed my profession.
Okay.
For the most part, I mean, I know there are places where they're probably still okay and don't care, but for the most part, it's destroyed, and that's what I wanted to say.
So, if you can identify anybody that you think might make a good guess, we're definitely open to having someone come on and discuss this specific issue.
If I had known anybody, I would have told you already.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'll keep my eyes out, and it's a very important issue, and it's very relevant to the overall situation. You know, the geopolitical situation, the political situation, the ideological struggle, the class war. Like this is an intrinsic aspect of those big issues, and it's a big issue in itself. So I know we appreciate you joining us and sharing your thoughts and opinions.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, no
It was
problem.
a
So, guys,
very interesting perspective, Manuel.
That's what I say. It's interesting because you don't hear it very much, and I'm not sure why. But other than that, you should hear it everywhere.
Amen to that.
so do you guys have anything else, or should we end? We're an hour and a half in.
Do you want to see something nice that's just 16 seconds?
Yes.
And kind of historic? This is the USA signing basically
Leaving Niger.
in Niger, yeah, being booted out. Isn't this just beautiful? All right, well, you know, sign here, the same that they did to the Japanese, and then you pack off and leave.
Yeah,
I bet the Nigerians are going, bye-bye, Yankee, go home.
I hope the Yankees don't have some shenanigans planned and up their sleeve for a counter coup, et cetera, et cetera. But we're definitely happy they're leaving. On that note, guys, that's a great note to end on. It's episode 94 Tuesday. We'll be back on Friday with episode 95. Thank you very much.
Take care. Have a good week.
Bye.